DJ 파틸이 그 첫 번째 강연자입니다. 네. 데이터 과학이 펼치는 새로운 세상이라는 주제로 첫 번째 강연을 해주실 텐데요. 여러분 큰 박수로 모시겠습니다.
Thank you for having me. You know, the time we live in right now is truly remarkable. And it's really interesting to try to get our head around this when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution and how much is truly changing. And I think to put it in context, if we think about what a decade ago, just literally 10 years looked like. You know, our phones, they didn't take pictures. They didn't even have this idea of doing videos. Videos on a phone was just not even a possibility. You know, buying shoes on the internet was a weird idea. Carrying a stack of maps when you land in a new country or a new city was a very normal thing to do. What's that look like today? Now, it's not just what does it look like, it's actually what do we expect. It's what do we expect to have readily at our fingertips. It's not just news, it's fully customized news. We expect our traffic information to be there with our maps. We expect there to be real-time routing and changing of directions. We don't have to have a car. We can have car service on demand through many, many different forms of those apps. We're not just moving on a day of one-day shipping. We're now expecting one-day shipping. We have fitness trackers, wearables, all these different ideas to keep track of us and understand how we live, how we interact, but also to get seamless services. And so that revolution in which is happening is really a revolution that has taken place within a lifetime. Those type of revolutions have not traditionally happened in such a small period of time. And the foundation of that data revolution is data itself. The part there that is really fascinating is about where is that going and what's kind of the next generation of that revolution. And it's Internet of Things. It's genomic and what we call precision medicine, the idea of creating truly tailored treatments for people. Data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, drones, planes, trucks, all of these things wrapped up together is really where this is going. And that really is what led the President Obama, as you saw, really say, hey, what do we need at the forefront for the federal government to really start thinking about how this change is going to take place? And that was a role that was really thought about as saying there needs to be a chief data scientist who's going to help channel this energy and figure out what this looks like. And so with the role of any brand new role, the most important thing to do is establish a mission. What is the mission? And the mission, simply put, for the U.S. Chief Data Scientist is to responsibly unleash the power of data to benefit all Americans. And there's two parts of this statement that are critically important. The first is responsibly, and the second part is all Americans. The part about responsibility, especially when working about data or any of these type of technologies, is that just because we can doesn't always mean we should. And that question of responsibility is one that has to continue throughout the evolution of technology. The second part, as we heard from both the President's and the Prime Minister's remarks, is that it must benefit all people. Everyone has to benefit, because right now, the technology doesn't benefit every single person. And this is where this gets really interesting, and this is why this was embedded permanently into the mission of the Chief Data Scientist. And the way we summarize it in terms of actually thinking about this is, what I assert is technology is neither radical nor revolutionary unless it benefits everyone. We have incredible technology out there. We just saw the self-driving cars and the new types of ways of having electric vehicles, and that is truly incredible. But does it benefit everyone yet? And so technology often, as what Gibson put it, the future is already here, but it's not uniformly distributed. And so let me give you an example. And this example is very US-centric, but it'll give you an example, a view of how different this is in terms of the radical aspects that a technology can actually do. So in this year alone, there'll be 11.4 million Americans who will cycle through our 3,100 jails. These are not our prisons. These are our local jails where somebody goes for a period of time when before they go to court or they try to determine their case. In that, though, those numbers, one of the things that is there that's important is that people stay on average 23 days, an incredible amount of time. But here's the shocking part. 95% of them will never go on to prison. So what we have, unfortunately, in our criminal justice system is this cycling where people just rotate in and out of the system, and they just get stuck there. And who pays for that? It's the local citizen that pays for it, because these are dollars that would normally go to a park, a school, a firefighter, a police officer, some service that's getting sucked out of that system and is just going to paying for this endless cycle of incarceration. So what do you do with that? Let me give you an example. This is Cook County Jail. Cook County Jail is our single largest one-site property of a jail inside the United States. It's about 90 acres. Cell phones there don't work for miles because nobody wants to invest in the infrastructure there. 1/3 of the inmates have mental health issues. Where's the technology revolution for these people? When you sit down with them and you sit down with families near the jail, everyone is constantly paying a price. Nobody gets those expectations that we talked about of having services. They don't have mapping technology, largely because cell phone service isn't there. They don't have one-day shipping because of the same reason. The technology infrastructure isn't built there. So we don't have that revolution for these people. And so what our focus was to ask, how do we make technology revolution happen for everyone? And let me give you an example. This is Pete and Kevin Early. Pete is the father, Kevin is his son. And Kevin has schizophrenia, a mental illness. And one day, Kevin had this psychotic episode and decided to break into his neighbor's house and crawl into the bathtub where police were called. And the officer approached him. In most of these situations, unfortunately, the outcome is not good. But in this case, the officer had been trained in what's called crisis intervention and had been knew how to actually interact with people with mental health issues and was able to calm Kevin down and get him to the right healthcare system. And here's the question. We often think about what we can do when we train a single human. We don't often ask, how do we make that scalable? And how could technology work to make that scalable? Pete claims that this officer's insight and intervention is what saved his son's life. How do we make that happen all around, especially when 1/3 of the inmates in jail have mental health issues? What we often look for in these data problems is what we call the sexy solution. The problem that is the thing that's going to save and look really great on a headline. What we need to do is often look at the most boring problems out there. And that most boring problem is one of the ones we created, which was called the White House Data-Driven Justice Initiative. And it does something very, very simple. It says, for data that sits in the criminal justice system, share it with the data in the healthcare system. Now, you might ask, why doesn't the data from the healthcare system already get shared with the criminal justice system? Well, part of that reason is because of privacy issues, but mostly it's because people never thought about it. So what happens if you just said, hey, if you see this person who has mental health issues come to the jail, instead of having them sit in jail, get them to the right treatment center, get them to the right crisis center. Those seem like easy things. It's not machine learning. It's not data science. It's simple spreadsheets. How big is the impact? Miami-Dade, Florida implemented this solution. It cost them $1.5 million in US dollars, and it saved more than $10 million in the first year, just simply sharing that data. But more importantly, they were able to close a full jail. The second year, they were able to close another jail. just by simply sharing the data. Let me give you another example. This is Grace Clark. She's a young woman, and she's teaching the superintendent of police in New Orleans, in Louisiana, how to write his first line of code. Normally in this situation, you never see a young kid in the power position. Who's in power in this situation? The person who's in power is a young girl. And she's showing the chief how to look at data about his own department. Now, it turns out many cities don't have the ability to compare data from one group to another. And so what we started was what's called the White House Police Data Initiative, which simply allows one department to open up their data to compare it to another department or to compare it to another city. Because it turns out that there is no benchmark, there is no baseline. People don't even know how good of a job they're doing. If we can't measure it, how do we expect to fix it? How do we expect to have a conversation about the data? This is what's enabling this. More importantly, what it's doing is it's taking data out of a silo that sits within only the police department, and it opens it up for a community to have a discussion. It takes the power and returns it back in the way democracy was designed. It puts data in the power position to enable the population and the citizens. And so what we have to do is figure out, how do we make this technology work for us rather than against us? Because these technologies are really powerful, but how do we ensure that it's going to work for us? And so let me give you this example, which is Jennifer Bittner. Jennifer wrote into President Obama about her cancer. She has stage 4 metastatic cancer. It's very serious. She went through a very sophisticated treatment regimen, and she's doing okay at the moment. That's her husband, Rod. She has a beautiful son. She has another son on the way. They're an amazing family. And what she pointed out to us is that she said, there's an arc of progress of science, and there's an arc of how long I should expect to live based on the type of cancer that I have and the recurrence of cancer. She also pointed out that there's a pace of what technology is supposed to do. And that process and that technology currently will not allow her to live long enough to see her son learn how to ride a bike or to learn to be in his first school play, something many of us take for granted. Cancer is a disease of not a nation. It's not a disease of a gender. It's not a disease of a particular ethnicity. It's a disease of DNA. And so she asked, why can't we do more? And this is a good question. So what's holding us back? What's holding us back from a solution? It's oftentimes a database. In fact, it's thousands of databases, because the medical records and all the data for these things are broken up all over the place. They're put all over in these different systems. And as a result, nobody can actually bring the data together to find solutions. And that's why we created the White House Precision Medicine Initiative and the Cancer Moonshot, to say, let's bring data in from all these different places. Let's get the best data scientists, machine learning, artificial intelligence people to work on that data to find solutions that we may not have expected to find in the large data sets. So what does make America great? It's a question that's been going on right now. And let me walk you through some of the examples that I've seen that are really, I think, most relevant for Korea as we're heading into this fourth industrial revolution. Let me start with Matt Might. That's Matt and his son Bertrand, and we're having Bertrand's birthday at the White House bowling alley. Matt Might is a computer scientist, and his son was born with a genetic defect, but they didn't realize it at the time. The way they figured it out was his son Bertrand wouldn't have any tears, couldn't cry. Now, Matt Might started looking into this. He started talking to doctors, and doctors finally said, you know what? Your son has a rare genetic disorder, and he is a sample size of 1. He's the only person in himself like it in the world. No one else has that problem. But Matt is a computer scientist, so he said, I don't believe you. The math doesn't work out that way. So he wrote a blog post that was hyper-optimized for Google search results to help any parent who would be looking for similar symptoms. No tears, other type of aspects. And what Matt very quickly found out is that there are many other parents who actually had the same problem. Science just didn't know how to look for them. But Google search engine did. So then he was able to get all those people together and say, what are we going to do with it? And those parents started looking around, trying to find solutions, advocating for different type of research. Matt finally decided to start testing the drugs on himself. He tested one of those drugs, worked okay. He then tested it on his son, and for the first time ever, his son actually had tears. That's the power of when you take technology, you put it in the hands of a parent who has unbelievable desire to find a solution to save his child's life. That's what the fourth industrial revolution is about. It's about empowering people to do that. Normally, this is what you see in a movie, but it's not just them. This is Sonia and Eric. Sonia's mother died of a horrible genetic disease. She ended up tested. She has 50% probability that she will also die of that disease. They're a lawyer and city planner. They decided to give up their lives and retrain to go find a solution to save her life. One's a computer science portion, the other is the wet lab portion trying to do the genetics. And they're both together at the Broad Institute, which is the top biomedical institution in the United States, one of our top ones, and they're chasing down the solution to save her life. The two of them, they changed careers. We have incredible amounts of people who have stepped away from their job to become what are known as Presidential Innovation Fellows, where they leave their job for up to 2 years, come into the government, and serve to figure out solutions to these problems. And many of these people are the ones who actually make this happen and come up with the solutions. Antwi lives in Oakland, and he's taking local data and combining it with other types of data to help make cities give better information and do better work. Some of you may be wearing one of these type of fitness devices like a Fitbit or one of these other kind of wearables. What we did together through these projects is we said, well, what happens if you took that data and gave it back to the cities so the cities knew where everyone would walk, so that you could invest more in the structures to help facilitate people walking more and getting people to move. People are making these things happen at the local level, and that just happens by opening up the data, sharing it, and getting people to play with it and use it in interesting ways. Remarkable things happen when you put data in the hands of people. This is Sujana. Sujana came to us at the White House Science Fair, and she's really a remarkable young woman. She's, I think, 17 when she visited us. But more importantly, she's been working on what's called renal failure. This is when one of your kidneys fails. This is an incredibly painful disease in the United States. It costs about $30 billion a year, $30 billion US dollars a year. And it also eventually will cost you your life. Now, Sujana has been working on a specialized treatment, a way of coming up with building an artificial kidney. She's so good that the University of Kentucky said, we'll give her a whole entire lab just to work on her project. This is a number of members from the lesbian, gay, transgender community who came together to say, what could we build together for particular populations that have no recourse? What does it look like if we allowed them to build technology that best serves their community? This is Tilly. Tilly's a young girl. You'll notice that Tilly she looks like she has a robotic arm because she doesn't actually have an arm. That's a fully robotic prosthesis. And she's able to use it. There she's grasping my White House notebook. Interestingly, what that sticker on the White House notebook was given to us by the president. It says, make life better for all Americans. Tilly embodies what we're trying to do in this industrial revolution. Make this work for every single person. What would it take to do that? This is Rebecca and Kimberly. They are, I think, about 6 and 8 when we did this. And Rebecca and Kimberly, what they did is they launched their own satellite. I don't know what you were doing when you were 6 or 8, but I didn't know how to do this. And what they launched is a little toy cat, not a real cat, a toy one. And they designed the whole system by themselves. This is the power of what happens when we foster our youth with the ability to do new things. Steve has a debilitating disease. He only has a little minimal use of one hand, but he can code. And he built an app with this team where they're looking to figure out where are there problems in the sidewalk so that wheelchairs can't go up and down on the curbs. And he single-handedly has been doing most of the coding. How does he do that? 1, it's just determination. 2, it's the power of the technology that we have. If anybody can code, why can't Steve be allowed to code? Steve's going to understand issues that we can't experience because of the conditions of his lifestyle. And that's why it's so important that we empower everyone with these technologies. One of the things that I'm particularly proud about, and we've been in a very fierce competition with Korea around our math Olympiads, is the United States team for the last 2 years has been the gold medalists. And this is the team most recently that visited us at the White House. What changed from the U.S. team not being in the lower ranks to now having the gold medal twice? It's that the coach, a really remarkable teacher named Poe, has really been focused on making math fun and application-based. If we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, we need to talk also about the basic training that's going to get us there. If we want to talk about empowering everybody and having humans at the forefront, we better start here by talking with students about what does it mean to think about science, math, all of those aspects with the humanity as they go forward. And these kids are at the forefront of doing that. One of the things that we've also focused on are what we call hackathons, bringing groups together and technologists to really ask interesting questions. This is a team out when I was visiting San Francisco where they're working on suicide prevention and trying to understand how could they build new technologies to address this. Finally, this one young girl, that's her, and I'm pointing to her husband, who's there in blue. And it's unfortunately one of the things that happened. His name is Jake Brewer. And Jake was unfortunately killed when he was at the White House, working at the White House. He was raising money for cancer. Really a really remarkable individual and an incredible loss. Phenomenal dad, phenomenal husband. But the second to last email that Jake ever sent to me was this. And he said, every citizen needs to take a pledge. We do have a Pledge of Allegiance, we have all these things, but what would it really mean to be a pledge, to be a citizen, and to really think about technology the right way? And while this says, I pledge to be an active American, I think you can put in there, I pledge to be an active Korean. I think you can put any country in there. An active participant. And the parts here that I think are most important are about this is that really that last paragraph, which is, it says, I pledge to serve and push my country when right, to be kept right. When wrong, to be set right. Wherever my ancestors and I were born, I claim America and I pledge to live like a citizen. And it's a fascinating thing if you go through the exercise and you ask, what does that mean as we're about to embark on this next revolution, this fourth industrial revolution? Because this is actually the central question. The technology is going to get there. I have no doubt the technology will get there. What I am deeply concerned about is what does it mean and look like in a democracy under which we operate with that technology? And those are the questions. For those that are paying attention in the news just over the last 24 hours, we're seeing a massive cyber attack happening in Europe right now. And those type of activities, as we've seen with Russia meddling in the US elections, is one of those big issues. And that's something that we have to be asking for when we get to that fundamental question of what does it mean to have a technology that works for us rather than against us. Here's my 3 core principles as we embark on this 4th industrial revolution. People are always greater than data. Always greater than data. Data is a force multiplier. It is the single-handed thing that you can give people that empowers them more than anything else. It is that dramatic force multiplier. And third, the time to address these issues is now. We often think, oh, we can get to this. We have to get ahead of that right now and be ready for these issues. This is my one of the cards I kept in my White House notebook. And I tweeted out, and people were very excited by when I shared it, because I think for a couple reasons. One is, this is how we approach all our technology and all our policy aspects. And it simply says, dream in years, plan in months, evaluate in weeks, ship daily, which means always be delivering, always be building, always be progressing forward. The second part of it is, how do you actually make it happen? You prototype for 1x. You build for 10x. You engineer for 100x. You start, you try, you fail, you iterate. You have to build a culture of failure by trying, but that culture of failing is done in a safe way at the level of which you do that at the 1x level. But then you build it for the 10x level, and you make it bigger. And once you have that right, you engineer it to scale to everybody at 100x. And you think about all the edge cases, and you make sure it works for everyone. But without that process, it becomes too hard to take on these big challenges. Finally, the question which I think we always have to ask ourselves, what's required to cut the timeline in half? What's required to cut the time to delivery in half? And the second part, what's required to double the impact? And the reason that's so important is when you double the impact, you talk about things this way, you're talking in exponentials and logarithms rather than linearly. And so let me just close with this. I'm here to talk about data science and the power that that does. I didn't show you any equations. I didn't put any graphs or charts. The only thing that really this comes down to at the end of the day is focusing on the people. It's focusing on the people that matter and are going to drive not just our country, but our 2 countries together. Thank you.
네, 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.